How I discovered there are no elect in the Bible. How did I come to realize there are no elect in the Bible? This is a story of my journey of discovering that there are no elect in the Bible. First, I was not a Christian. I came to Jesus from an unchurched background. So I did not know what going to church was about. I did not know what the Bible taught or what the Bible said to teach. As I read the Bible for the first time as a new believer at the age of 14, I read that pride was a sin. I learned there was a devil. And yes, I read of the elect. The elect are mentioned numerous times in the English translated Bible. Jesus said, when speaking about the prophesied great tribulation to come, that unless those days were shortened, no one would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. This mention of the elect gives an idea of a particular group of people. Still talking about days to come, Jesus said 2 verses later, false Christs and false prophets would arise and show great signs and wonders so as to deceive even the elect. Again, a certain group appears in view. Later, in the same chapter, 7 verses further on, Jesus says, God will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. This appears as a special type of group. I have just quoted 3 separate mentions of the elect. Mark in his Gospel repeats these very same examples. So these are 3 statements, these very same examples. That means together, since it's repeated in Mark, already 6 times now the elect are mentioned in the New Testament. In Luke, after talking about a persistent widow, Jesus says, shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bear long with them? So as you read about the elect, you ask yourself, who are the elect? Who are those in this special group? It appears to talk about believers, about God's saints. After all, right there in Luke, Jesus says how much they pray. That would be believers. So yes, right there was my introduction to the elect. Then, as a young believer, I also learned that the words of the New Testament were first written in Greek. And such things as love was represented by not just one word in Greek, but several, to clarify what kind of love was involved. There's phileo, there's agapao, there's philanthropia, and so on. So what about the elect? What Greek word does that come from? They all come from one word in the Greek, EKLEKTOS. Well, that is in the Bible like the King James Version, for example. But there's one other English word we use to translate eklektos. One is elect, and the other is chosen. Now, elect is not such a common word in everyday English. Chosen, yes. This is much more common. So is that what the elect are? A chosen group of people? Jesus said, many are called, few EKLEKTOS. This is given as chosen. That is chosen from EKLEKTOS. We read then, many are called, few are chosen in the English Bible. What does this mean? Does God choose some over others? Is that then a chosen group of people who, when you read of the elect, the chosen elect, seen in our Bibles, the elect appear as the chosen, as an apparent natural meaning when reading this, doesn't it? I mean, elect, chosen, same Greek word. The elect are the chosen. Then to this was added what the Calvinists say. I discovered this well by talking with a friend who went to a local Grace Baptist church. He confirmed that the choice was of both. God is said in Calvinism to choose both those who are saved, the elect in their view, and God is said also to thus clearly choose to those who go to hell, the so-called reprobate. That is to say, in their view, all who remain that way, reprobate, sinners, God has chosen them to not enable them to be saved. That is Calvinism. This is not extreme Calvinism, this is basic Calvinism. This is the core of Calvinism. The choice of God is said to happen long before the lifetime of the individual. This belief, however, depicted a God different than I had read in my Bible. You see, I read how God desires all men to be saved. I read that he has no pleasure in the death of the wicked. How could this be true, the above, if God chose all those who would be lost? So this is where I was as I began my journey of discovery. There are no elect in the Bible. This is what I discovered, but this was my beginning. I read it in the English Bible. I read what people said about it. And this discovery happened out of the blue. So it happened like this. In the 90s, I started going to a celebration event in southeast London. It was held at Sedge Hill School, which is in Beckenham. This was run by EKLEKTOS Christian Fellowship with Roger and Faith Forster. And Graham Kendrick, he's better known, was one of the worship leaders there at the time. So I, as I say, this is in the 90s. I attended one such celebration event and saw on their bookstall copies of a book called God's Strategy in Human History, authored by Roger Forster and Paul V. Marston. I got a copy right there. The book made a claim that in Proverbs 8:19, a verse which mentions the benefit of wisdom is worth more than gold and choice silver. That's the word for top quality of silver. There, that word was translated from eklektos in the Septuagint. What's the Septuagint? The Septuagint is the Bible version of the Old Testament that Jesus and the apostles quote in the New Testament. Septuagint was the first Bible of the first Christians for up to 3 centuries, to which were added the Gospels and letters of the New Testament. It's until they were written, the Gospels and the letters, which make up the New Testament, the only Bible they had was the Old Testament, but in the Greek version, this version called the Septuagint. But the Old Testament version we have in our Bibles today is not from the Greek version. It's from the original Hebrew, which is the language the scriptures of the Old Testament were first written in, with a few portions in Aramaic, a different language. So how did this translation of the Old Testament happen, this into Greek? Well, Greece was not a small country in terms of influence in those days. What happens, Alexander the Great was Greek. He came to power and he conquered the known world. When he defeated the Medes and the Persians, he was the ruler of the known world. But he died soon after his conquests. And his empire was then divided into 4 realms of their own. But all of these 4 realms retained the Greek language as their language for administration, for trade, and much culture. So that in about the 3rd century BC, before Christ, the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, was translated into Greek. That is what we now call the Septuagint, this Greek version of the Old Testament. John and Luke tell us that in their Gospels, that the sign Pilate put up on the cross, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. These were the 3 main languages in Jerusalem at the time. Latin was the new language on the block. It was because it was only about 63 BC, before Christ, that Pompey, the Roman general, conquered Judea, which is where Jerusalem is. The Romans were now the new rulers of the known world. All of these great empires, the Babylonians, the Medes and the Persians, the Alexander the Great, divided into 4, and then the Romans, all these were all prophesied in Daniel. Daniel came to the fore during the great empire, the first one of those, that of the Babylonians, under Nebuchadnezzar. So in the known world of the day, Greek was and remained the main interactive language right up to the 4th century AD, after death, after the year of the Lord. We know this because when the Roman Emperor Constantine came to power, he stopped the official persecution of Christians. And the main leaders of all the Christians in the whole Roman Empire realm got together, and in a place called Nicaea, which is a place in Turkey now. And all the proceedings of that event and all the writings of that event, the records, were done in Greek, because it was the language everybody was using for interaction, for commerce, for trade, right up to that's in 325 AD. So I say all this to give you a good perspective of the importance of the Septuagint. This was the Old Testament the first Christians were using for hundreds of years after Jesus ascended. This Septuagint is a version of the Old Testament that is quoted in the New Testament. So when we read our Old Testament in our English translations, because that's translated from the Hebrew, there's sometimes differences from the quotes that we read in the New Testament. That's because the quotes were from the Greek version. Now, as I read this book, and I just read about this Proverbs 8:19 verse, which said that choice silver, quality silver, is from the Greek EKLEKTOS. I wanted to see for myself, is this true? By the way, this is one of the original editions of this book. There are later editions and versions. I believe this one is from an American publisher, but it's the same title, slightly edited differently. But it says that portion of about EKLEKTOS. So I picked up the phone and got in touch with my friend Dave Locke, manager of the Christian bookshop, the Manor Christian Centre in Streatham, that is in South London. I said to something like this: "Hi Dave, can you get hold of a copy of the Septuagint for me?" And his reply was something like, "Would you like a concordance to go with that?" It just so happens he had both a copy of the Septuagint and a concordance of Greek words in the Septuagint to sell me. Praise God. So I got my copy of the Septuagint right there, and a copy of Morrish's Greek words in the Septuagint. So as soon as I got my copy, I looked up Proverbs 8:19, and sure enough, EKLEKTOS was there. It was the word translating choice silver, top quality silver. The meaning of top quality was clear. But now I also had a copy of words in the Septuagint. This means I also had the knowledge of all the places in the Septuagint where EKLEKTOS could be found. So I began to look them up too. And what did I find? Well, when Joseph was in prison in Genesis, and he was asked to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, the first dream that Pharaoh had fat cows that came out of the Nile. The fat cows are translated as EKLEKTOS cows, quality beefy meat. In the second dream, there were plump kernels of wheat, EKLEKTOS wheat. Young men, guys in their prime, EKLEKTOS, fit for soldier material, therefore young men. Highest branches, EKLEKTOS branches. Pleasant land, EKLEKTOS land. To the pure, you show yourself pure, EKLEKTOS. Choice silver was in good company. But this is a world apart from meaning selected, chosen, elect, isn't it? I dug further. I found there are 24 Hebrew words directly translated by EKLEKTOS. Morrish found 84 in total, but about 15 do not directly translate a Hebrew word. That's why I'm saying 74 times. EKLEKTOS is found directly from a Hebrew word. The beauty of this find, the great thing about this discovery, is that we have those Hebrew words occurring a total of 594 times in our Old Testament, in the Hebrew, which makes up the whole Old Testament. So we've a solid and good view of what these Hebrew words mean. But I wasn't quite there yet. I did not look at those 594 places yet. So at this stage, what did I deduce? What did I learn from this find? I found a majority view for the meaning of eklektos. And that view is, it's best, tops, excellent, young men, pure, highest branches, fat cows, pleasant land, rich apparel, quality, tops, best. But 4 Hebrew words gave a doubt to the excellent view. Prominent of these 4 Hebrew words is BACHAR. BACHAR is the most used word in the Old Testament for to choose and chosen. In the King James Version, for example, we poetically find that BACHAR is given as choose 77 times and chosen a further 77 times, so 77 and 77. So this discovery of the majority view needed to be made known, but I also shared about the minority view, with BACHAR as the prominent backbone to that doubt. And this is why I produced a booklet. I produced a summary of what I found, a majority view and a minority view, which was a doubt element to excellent. I had copies at half price for the Bible Society, whom I informed of the research. They bought several. But my focus and time was taken not only with a full-time job, but to complete my second book. And overall, it took me 14 years to finish Leadership Ismail. And it was during this time I was in the midst of this discovery. This meant any further research for eklektos had to wait. But I produced what I had put together in my booklet, pretty much unchanged, also as an appendix to my third book, which was this one. So as an appendix at the back, I put in what I put in the booklet. This is why when that work, which is accounted to Calvinism, came out, and I was involved in a Revelation TV debate with my opponent Steve Jeffrey on the topic of Calvinism, he used the minority view as a response to my assertion that eklektos does not mean chosen or elect. And I couldn't deny the then present doubt, which was the element because I showed what I discovered. There's a majority view, there's a minority view. Then a little later, with a slight update, I also included this research with a slight addition, as I said, slight update, in my book, Serious Mistranslations of the Bible. So because it's to do with translation, I felt I needed to include it in that too. But it was not until I was cornered in a number of ways that I did an exhaustive look at all those places where those Hebrew words are found. What I felt to do up till now was look exhaustively at these that were translated directly by eklektos, those 24 Hebrew words. And all the 594 texts where they appear, I now looked at. I'm glad I eventually did this because do you remember my mentioning the Hebrew word bachar as the backbone of the doubt element? The word that is literally seen as to choose and chosen 77 times and 77 times. Well, I discovered that bachar has two separate meanings. One is used often, as you see from to choose, and another not so often. This is not uncommon. In English, for example, we have words with two meanings. You see exactly the same word spelt the same way, pronounced the same way, and the only way you can tell which of the meaning is meant is by the immediate context of different words. So the best way you see this is when both meanings are found in the same sentence, the best way to see both meanings. In English with the word chair, for example, one would say, the chair of the committee was sitting on a leather chair. The person in charge of the meeting was not a piece of furniture. Two meanings. With the word table, for example, one could say, the book on the dining room table was open on the page named Table of Contents. A table of data is not a piece of furniture. So again, two meanings in the same sentence, with the same word being used. And this is true for a number of languages. In New Testament Greek, there are examples like GENEA and HAMARTIA as words that have two meanings. For GENEA, you mean generation or a posterity, a people, a group, this lot. The unbelieving lot, Jesus said. For hamartia, we have either sin or sin offering. So GENEA, I found one verse with both meanings in the Septuagint. I think it was in Esther. With the word bachar, I found two places with both meanings in the same passage, but the passage actually says the same in both. One is in Samuel and the other is in Chronicles. It relates to exactly the same circumstance and the same thing. So two verses with both meanings in the same passage. When Joab saw that the battle line was against him before and behind, he chose some choice men of Israel and put them in battle array against the Syrians. The NIV translates it well here. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him. So he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. So as you see, selected, chosen, best troops, choice men of Israel. Two different meanings. Exactly the same Hebrew word, bachar. And one is a different meaning to chosen, to elect. Remember, elect in every place in Greek comes only from EKLEKTOS. Okay. Now, remember, bachar was the Hebrew word translated by eklektos, which is the biggest way to a doubt that eklektos meant excellent. When the majority of the 24 Hebrew words translated by eklektos also translated were in the excellent category. Bachar is correctly given as chosen. So why is the second meaning of bachar important? Well, all the times eklektos translates bachar, the second meaning is in view and not the chosen category. I'll repeat that. all the times eklektos translates BACHAR, the second meaning of BACHAR is in view, not the chosen category meaning. Furthermore, since I looked at every place where BACHAR was translated, the other Greek words translating the second meaning show a high quality meaning as a full category is clear, because you have Greek words like dunatos, strong, able, neanias, young man, again, youth, guys in their prime, suitable for soldiers, neaniskos, young man, boy. So the other three minor doubt words also now having been handled, when I knew eklektos is in the category of the second meaning of BACHAR, the whole doubt element evaporated out the window. There was no pointer to eklektos ever meaning selected, chosen, or elect in the Septuagint. Do you think Jesus and the apostles who read and quoted the Septuagint used eklektos any other way than its sole meaning than of excellent, best, tops? So there are no elect. Elect only comes from eklektos in the New Testament of the KJV. And in the OT, it comes from the Hebrew word bachir, the word elect. But bachir is only translated by which Greek word in the Septuagint? And no other? Yes, eklektos. So we've got a wrong understanding of bachir and eklektos. What did I discover eklektos could mean historically? Excellent, best, tops. So you see, when Jesus said, many are called, few eklektos, Jesus said, many are called, few have mettle, few are up to the calling. Jesus did not say few are chosen. When Paul wrote about the eklektos angels, he was talking about the good angels, those that rebelled, fell. No, he talked about the faithful ones, not chosen or selected to be that. They are the holy ones, the good ones. Eklektos. So when the saints, the believers, are spoken of as eklektos, they are not being mentioned as chosen or elect, selected, but instead they're being mentioned as excellent, as the righteous ones, the holy ones. In fact, that's what the word hagia means, saints. It's holy, as the good and faithful servants of the living God. That's what eklektos means. That's what they are. So how was I to show that I had done all this work of discovery? How did I prove that all this was so? That is the full work. Everything is in here, explicitly printed out. But as David Pawson, the late David Pawson, said to me on the telephone, this reads like a telephone book, and he's absolutely right. This is, you can read the analysis and so on, and the rest is, it's there to show the work's been done. It's there to show you don't have to look them up elsewhere. It's all there for you if you need to confirm this is a valid discovery. So I removed all the excess, and about 400 pages. More if you realize that I actually added a chapter, and I produced this much shorter version, the companion to deleting elect in the Bible. And this chapter that I did gives pointers to how to translate all the passages where have wrongly had elect before and chosen from EKLEKTOS, because you can have chosen from BACHAR, as you know, and you can have chosen from other Greek words, which means exactly that, but not from EKLEKTOS. So many of you have metal is the correct meaning in that passage. So you have a good view of how you should read those passages. And there you can read medical if you have metal. You can read about the good angels, not the elect angels. You read about the faithful, the saints, the excellent, and so on. There you have it. This is my journey. My discovery that there are no elect in the Bible.